I'm Eric Singer, Gazette.com, and this is Between the Lines. Breaking down barriers, a special assignment we first told you about months ago, and now we're learning more about a historic church in the downtown area that has done a lot to make it more ADA accessible. Gazette reporter Stephen Hobbs joins me now. So what did you learn about First Congregational Church?
Well, the church completed its building in 1889, so it's a very old church, as you said, it's very historic. And what happened was they realized for years that their church was not accessible, so finally, after decades of wanting to do something, they added an elevator and accessible ramps to allow worshipers to come in and use their church and be able to get around.
What was the price tag of it?
It was about $950,000, so it wasn't a small job, but they felt like it was worth it for just being an inclusive church to people in the community.
And speaking of which, let's listen to one man who now sees the benefit of all that work done at First Congregational Church.
Well, I think it's great. I think they're wonderful. I think they did the right thing here. My presence is very much acceptable and wanted to be here. That they want me here. They want people like me here. They want a lot of people to come here.
You just heard Bruce Cummings talk about the benefits that he sees at First Congregational Church because of all the ADA accessibility changes that have been done in that church.
Yeah, and one thing I want to add, Eric, too, is religious entities aren't required to make accessibility changes under the Americans with Disabilities Act, so they kind of went over and above some of the requirements for a church to make these accessibilities for people like Bruce and others who use it.
Now let's talk about those renovations because, as you said earlier, more than $900,000. What exactly was done?
Well, they added, as I mentioned, the elevator, which connects 5 different levels of kind of a church building. There are still a couple areas in the church that aren't completely accessible, but they hope that they'll be able to kind of increase accessibility further. But at least buildings like that, or areas like the office building, the pastor's offices, those areas are now accessible to people, for example, in a wheelchair, as well as just adding different ramps and other things. One of the things that they had was they had accessible bathrooms downstairs, but the problem was there were stairs leading to that. So if someone was in a wheelchair, they actually couldn't access the accessible bathrooms. So now someone can go down the elevator, go to the accessible bathrooms, use them, and come back up and be able to use the rest of the building. So those are some of the things that they made.
And before we go, let's listen to the lead minister talk about why these changes were so important to him and to his church.
Well, it's important because we value as a congregation inclusion on various levels, and we realized that we couldn't keep talking about inclusion without having an accessible building.
You just heard the Reverend Dr. Benjamin Broadbent at First Congregational Church talk about why those ADA accessibility changes had to be made within his church. And we're continuing to take a look at things that are going on to make our community more ADA accessible.
Yeah, one of the things we had in the paper on Friday was the fact that there is a enforcement unit the Colorado Springs Police Department has in enforcing accessible parking spaces for people who have placards on their car as well as on their license plate. And we're going to continue to follow the city of Colorado Springs. They say that they're going to create this kind of opportunity to talk about some of the things that we mentioned in our report, whether it's building codes and other codes to try to make sure that the area is accessible. So we're going to keep track and see how they're doing and keep people updated in the community.
All right, thank you very much, Stephen. And you can read Stephen Hobbs and Stephanie Earle's story in the Gazette and on Gazette.com. With Between the Lines, Breaking Down Barriers, I'm Eric Singer, Gazette.com.